Good morning. March 11th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standards daily news, events, guests show, discussion show, all that good stuff. We do it every day live at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time and run to about 1 o'clock usually, Monday to Friday. It's been going quite well. We got a lot of good discussion issues and guests coming along. Make sure to fill up that comment scroll. I like that interactivity. That's the advantage. I mean, otherwise we might as well just record everything. So be sure to get your comments in there, talk with each other, send questions out to me. I won't necessarily read or get to every one of them, but I do see them all, and it helps keep things fresh. We get some really good ideas and notions and questions out of the comment scroll that we didn't anticipate sometimes, and it really adds to the whole discussion. Though, yeah, well, the ones on Charest's status, we'll see. I'm not terribly big on them myself, but I don't know if I use that term. Either way, so I got a couple of good guests. I got Barbara Kay coming on. She's one of our senior columnists, and she's been writing columns across the nation in some major publications for a long time. She wrote one recently on the use and abuse of the term Nazi. We just see it tossed out there frivolously and all the time, and it's tiresome. And she called people out on it. So we're going to talk a bit about that. I also, this was a recorded interview. It was the only time I could catch her, but I got Calgary councillor from Ward 1, Sonya Sharp, and talked to her about her first 6 months in office. Now, for people following the Calgary election, we had some slates going on. We had unions endorsing a certain number of councillors and candidates and everything. And it really looked like the vast majority of those on council were going to be really under the thumb of the unions and quite left-wing. But actually, Councillor Sharp, even though she was endorsed by the unions coming in, has proven herself to be very much her own person. She stands up for herself, and she's shown a lot of common sense in what was a very volatile first 6 months in council. So we'll play the recording of that interview I had with her yesterday a little later in the show as well. So I'm going to get on to what's got me going today. And, this wasn't something unexpected, but it's time for me to talk about it. And that's the Canadian establishment. And they've selected their candidate for the Conservative leadership. And yes, that candidate is Jean Charest. They don't really care what the name of the party in power is, as long as the leader is a Liberal in reality. And Charest has that down in spades. And Charest has been basically a charter member of the Canadian Laurentian elite since the 1980s. And while he's been something of a political nomad, he's consistently remained a Liberal at heart. And when I talk about Laurentian elite, I mean, it's a term you've seen thrown around out there. It talks about those people who feel entitled to control Canada. If you're in the St. Lawrence River Valley area, if you're in Ottawa, if you're in Hull, you're in that sort of part of the world, to Toronto, Montreal, this is where this group comes from. It always is. These are the ones who actually run our country, and they don't look highly on those who come from outside of there. So for those not young enough not to remember Jean Charest that well, I'll review him quickly and some of his history. Charest won a federal seat in the 80s with the Progressive Conservatives, and he was put quickly into cabinet by Brian Mulroney. I mean, he was a young minister at that time. It was quite a coup. And then he stayed in there until 1993, when the Progressive Conservatives were obliterated electorally by the Canadians, who were repulsed with their ongoing arrogance, whiffs of corruption, and, of course, the regional favoritism. Of that sweep, only Charest and Elsie Wayne, there were only two members of parliament who survived. I mean, we went from the largest majority in Canadian history to the PCs being reduced to just 2 seats. And Charest held one of those. So this led to Charest becoming the PC leader essentially by default. He did lead the party into a bit of an electoral recovery in 1997 when they won 20 seats, but they were still eclipsed by the Reform Party. And they were the rump of a fading party. I mean, that was the last gasp of the Progressive Conservatives on the federal scene. So Charest abandoned them, and he moved on to enter provincial politics as a Liberal in Quebec in 1998. And you got to remember, again, Charest fought all efforts to merge the PC party with the Reform Party. He wanted to keep those PCs red. There were old players back then, David Orchard and a few others. They just wanted to make sure there was always a Progressive Conservative Party in there to keep as a thorn in the butt of the Conservatives. And he eventually they did die and fade away, that party, but sure, not to the wishes of Charest. So as the Premier of Quebec, Charest became Premier. He fought heartily to increase equalization for Quebec and claimed there was a regional imbalance that harmed Quebec economically. It's a load of bunk, of course, but it always sells well in Quebec. I mean, if you're going to be the Premier of Quebec, that's what you got to do. You're not going to get in there otherwise. I mean, he campaigned in Quebec on tax reductions, and then he moved on to raise all sorts of costs and fees, insurance rates, all sorts of things. Typical red Tory campaign style. Campaign conservative, governed left. He tended to blame the Harper government later on for a lot of Quebec's woes, of course. Now, eventually, Charest wore out his welcome as Quebec's premier in 2012 when he lost his own seat in a general election, so he resigned as the leader. He then traveled through the elite circles as a consultant for quite some years, and you'd see his name popping up. One most notably, of course, was with Huawei in recently. And that's Huawei is, a Chinese company with some very corrupt underpinnings, some real big problems. And, those ties to China with the Laurentian elites in Canada run deep. Now Charest decided to run for the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And his kickoff last night, the answers to his questions posed by the David Naylor with the Western Standard were pretty telling. And Dave and I are going to talk about that in a bit here. Charest said he's proud of the work he did to sort out the situation of Huawei executive Miss, and I'm terrible with these pronounces, Meng Wanzhou. I might be corrected for that later. But I mean, she was the daughter, I believe, of the head of that corporation. And there was definitely some problems. So she was arrested. That led to, of course, the incarceration of 2 Canadians, the 2 Michaels that they got referred to later. And eventually there was a hostage exchange. I mean, nobody likes to admit it, but that's what happened. They let those 2 out and they sent Meng back to China. So after 1,019 days in detention, shortly after Meng was released from house arrest in Canada, the 2 Michaels got released. And Charest was a whole part of that thing. Whether it's a good thing or bad, he was on the Huawei side of things. He was the negotiator on that end. So, I mean, he's entrenched in those old corrupt institutions. Now, when he was asked about his support for the National Long Gun Registry, Charest kind of dodged, because there was, as a Premier of Quebec, he didn't want to see it go away. When he's asked about the carbon tax, again, got mushy. He didn't commit to repealing it, that's for sure. I guess it's better than lying about repealing it as O'Toole did. It's a more principled stance by not, saying you're going to get rid of it. Charest happily implemented a carbon tax in Quebec. He was a strong proponent of the Kyoto Accord commitments from the 90s that put Alberta's energy production at risk. Look, the Laurentian elites are tiring of Trudeau. They also realize that Trudeau might be heading towards an electoral loss soon, so they need to hedge their bets. And Charest is their man. In policy stances, Charest is no different than any federal liberal. We'll see continued carbon taxes, capitulation to Quebec and China, along with moves to seize firearms from law-abiding citizens. We can look forward to the same old Central Canadian crony capitalism as outlying provinces are drained to feed the Central Canadian monster. O'Toole was a liberal who pretended to be a conservative, and that cost him the election. Charest is not even pretending to be a conservative. That might actually garner him the support of the Central Canadian establishment, and that could lead to him winning the next federal election. It won't be easy for somebody who's clearly liberal as Charest to win the leadership of the CPC, but he has some heavy backing. He's most definitely a contender, and he's no fool, unlike the liberal leader of Canada right now. The Laurentian elite will win eventually, and Canadians will continue to lose again. That's what we got coming with Charest. Okay, so before I get to our news check-in with Dave Naylor, he was sent out on assignment last night to the Wild Rose Brewery where Jean Charest announced his entrance into the Conservative Party race. And Dave got right into there in the scrum and got a couple of questions directly to Charest, which were ones that our mainstream media surely wouldn't have asked. So, I mean, again, it shows he pushed in there, got those questions asked on our behalf, because the other, and it forced the issue for Charest to answer those things, which he obviously didn't want to get into. Let's just play that clip before we get to Dave.
Mr. Charest, Dave Naylor with the Western Standard. You have held some policies that the Westerners haven't liked. Long gun registry, the carbon tax, your work with the Chinese Huawei group when they were holding prisoners. How are you going to overcome those obstacles in the West?
Well, you have a list there. Let's start with Huawei. And what we did in Huawei, I'm very proud of what we did in helping to sort out the situation of Miss Meng Wanzhou. And I worked with the family of Michael Cory so that we could free the 2 Michaels. And we worked with them very, very closely throughout the whole process. And I never did anything and would have never done anything that would have been contrary to the interest of my country. So in fact, we were very, very active in helping resolve that matter and to bring the 2 Michaels home. So on that, on the long gun registry, the police forces in Quebec are the ones who said, if you're going to do away with the registry, why don't you just transfer over to us the information that's there? That's the long and the short of it on that. That was very simple to do. And your other question was on
carbon tax.
Well, we will have an opportunity to talk about that during the campaign, but let me start by the beginning. We need a very, very comprehensive approach that includes policies that are going to promote economic growth and make sense by themselves. Carbon capture and storage, blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, small modular reactors. Hydro, of course, is part of that. Biofuels. I mean, those are the things that we need to be smart about. And I'm very committed to designing a policy that is going to be good and will deal with transition. I'll give you an example. I was in Europe a few weeks ago. The European Commission just announced their transition energy policy. And in their transition, they're including nuclear and natural gas. And they're doing it for a reason, because it makes sense. If you want to transition to a point where you take carbon out of the economy or the energy sector, well, then that's what you have to do. You need to be smart about it. And that's what we'll do for Canada. But the provinces will be part of that, and the industry will participate in that.
Okay, so there's was picked up by our intrepid news editor, Dave Naylor, out in the field. Hopefully he got at least one or two good beers into him for his troubles as well down there. So let's bring him in and talk about that. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Good morning, Cory. You've heard that expression about you couldn't organize booze up in a brewery? That's kind of what it was like last night.
Yeah, a bit of a gong show. Well, I guess maybe, these races get off to a crazy start. It's probably, we'll see how many times he shows up in the West through the course of the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, it's probably kind of like the Prime Minister in a federal election campaign. We may have had him just the once. So we'll see. Remains to be determined. Charest is off to Vancouver tonight for an event out there.
Okay, so you dove right in there and you got a few good questions in before the rest of the legacy media could get in there. And, good Western issues. What did you think of Charest's responses there?
Well, mealy-mouthed, I guess, would be the way to go, Cory. You heard the clip. He was proud of his work in resolving the hostage taking of the two Michaels. I'm sure that's not going to completely scrub his hands clean. He was taking money from the communist Chinese government. In terms of the long gun registry, he put the blame on Quebec police, but he was the premier at the time. And the carbon tax, he talked about everything but a carbon tax. He talked about modular small nuclear devices. He talked about hydrocarbons. He says, we'll have a robust debate on the carbon tax during the campaign, but then he didn't mention anything about it, his plans at all. So remains to be seen what will come out between now and September 10th.
Okay, well, so what else have we got grinding up the newsroom today as we go into the weekend?
Yeah, a couple last things on last night. Cory. One interested viewer of the Western Standard live stream was one Pierre Polyev. We were the only ones to live stream it, and we saw him check in and watch the broadcast. So he certainly knows where to go for conservative leadership news. And I'd almost forgotten. It's been a while since I've been in a scrum that large, and I'd almost forgotten how rude and pushy the French media is. But it was all brought back to me last night. Other news today, we've got an Amanda Brown story up right now on the top of our website, talking about an RCMP arrest in Rocky Mountain House recently, in which the officer basically picked up and threw the arrested man into the back of his police truck, and his legs went flying. And it's kind of disturbing to watch. It's not something you see every day, so you can go and check that out. Disturbing story, Cory, on the number of kids participating in minor sports across the country. The numbers are plummeting. To the last time they checked, around 2020, the number was about only 60% of Canadian children were participating in sports. With all the cancellations during the COVID-19 pandemic, that number will plunge, no doubt, even further. And officials are worried that, come down the road in a couple of Olympics from now, the lack of children in sports is going to hurt the Canadian efforts. We've got a story on perhaps the woman who's got the best job in the Liberal government bureaucracy. She's the chief science advisor to Justin Trudeau's cabinet. And despite earning many hundreds of thousands of dollars in pay, she has not produced a single report in the last 2 years. But she has found time in her busy schedule to jet off to 19 separate faraway locations around the world at a cost of over $250,000. So nice work if you can get it there. Our Eva Suddick has got a story out on Angus Reid poll showing mental health stresses amongst Canadians have skyrocketed during the Olympics. 54% of all Canadians say their mental health has deteriorated. And my favorite story of the day, CBC for the second time has had to retract a truckers convoy story. The first one they did and had to retract was when they claimed the Russians were behind it. Obviously fake news there. And the second one they just retracted was one where they said the foreign donations were behind the main thing behind the convoy. And of course, that was not true, and they've retracted that statement. So, yeah, lots of good stuff up there already, Cory, and we're getting stuff ready for the weekend. I've got a Dave Makachuk column about to go up on the fighter jet situation, where Poland wants fighter jets donated to the Ukraine, and the U.S. is standing in the way. Makachuk will present an argument on how to get it done. So yeah, very busy morning and lots of stuff to come this afternoon.
Great. Well, thanks for the updates. I'll let you carry on managing that newsroom and still digesting what you got out of the conference last night, aside from some good craft beer at the Wild Rose Brewery.
Yeah, and it's moving day too, so we've got to get all packed up. And I hear rumors, Cory, that you don't have a lunch today. Why is that?
Yes, our brat of a foster dog jumped up on the counter and stole my sandwich off me this morning as I was getting ready. And I didn't have time to make myself another one. So there was half of a chewed sandwich left after I recovered it from him, but I figured I'm going to have to go without. So just a warning for some of the commenters and people. I'm going to be crabbier than usual today.
Well, maybe because it's moving day, Derek will buy beer and pizza.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, thanks, Dave.
We'll talk to you later.
You bet. I'll see you in a while. Okay, and that was Dave Naylor. So I'll just kind of remind everybody, and as you saw from that video we played earlier, Dave got right in there in the trenches. He's a veteran newsman, decades in the industry. And during that scrum, he got that mic into Jean Charest's face and asked some questions that I don't think Mr. Charest wanted to address. What about the long gun registry? These are Western questions we're concerned about, and it was a big issue when Charest was in as a premier. Of course, the carbon tax, it's a big contentious one. And the Huawei connections, these are the tough questions that need to be hit on these candidates if they're going to hope to become the leaders of that party. And well, as we saw in the video, Jean Charest, like any experienced politician, sort of danced around all three of them, but at least they were tossed at him because the legacy media probably wouldn't even have touched it. So be sure to get online, subscribe to us. That's how we can keep funding, our business. That's why we are on a moving day. We're moving to a different floor of the same building. We're going to have a lot more space in studio and for our newly hired reporters and such. And it's due to the subscribers who we really appreciate. They've been coming in great. And if you haven't subscribed already, please get on there. Take out a subscription with the Western Standard. It's a free trial for 2 weeks. You got nothing to lose. $10 a month after that. If you use the coupon code TRIGGERED, you'll get another $10 off of that. Plus, if it's an annual membership, it's $99 a year. You use all those incentives, you're going to get a free couple weeks. You're going to get $10 off, and then you'll get a discount for that. Cheaper than the old newspaper subscriptions and better content. Like I said, we get in there on the ground, and we do get exclusive content and get that news out to you from some great professionals out there. Plus, we have some fantastic columnists who contribute, and I'm going to bring one in right away, and that's Barbara Kay, I mentioned earlier. Anybody who's been familiar in reading news in this last, I won't say exactly how long, but over a period of time has been familiar with Barbara Kay's name out there writing. And it's been always great when we can get pieces from her. And she wrote one recently I'd like to talk about. So let's bring Barbara in and have a discussion about that. Hi, Barbara. How you doing?
I'm fine, Cory. How are you?
Pretty good. A little hungry, but
I had a Labrador who used to steal things off the counter, so I know I know what that's like. So sorry about
Yeah,
that.
they can be pretty smart when they want to be. Oh, well, I've got some spare calories that I can burn through the day, anyways. That won't put me at too much risk in the long run, but comes with it. So I'm glad you checked in. You wrote an article on something that always annoys the heck out of me, and it's just been happening too much. It's a bigger and bigger trend, and that is with people just your column was entitled, everyone needs to stop calling everyone else a Nazi, and that's not even a left thing, a right thing. That word is being abused and overused by people all over the place, and it's getting tiresome and offensive to some.
It certainly is all over the place. I mean, I think I do hear it more from the left, but you do occasionally hear it from the right as well. And this reductio ad Hitlerum, I think it's called in Latin. When you really dislike someone, you hate their politics, you hate their tactics, uh, you call them a Nazi, because in our society, the worst thing in the world you can be is a Nazi. Everybody knows that the Nazis were the worst, and Hitler was the worst in all of recorded history. Nobody's been worse than that. But because of that fact, it's so important to be careful about who you call Hitler, because it shuts up the other person real fast, right? I mean, once you've if I'm a fan of Donald Trump, which I'm not, by the way, but if you are, and somebody says, "Oh, but he's as bad as Hitler," uh, instead of defending Trump's policies or anything else, you're going to be saying, "No, no, no, he's nothing like Hitler." Oh, yeah? Well, and then they start saying, "But he's this and he's that." So you end up discussing whether he's Hitler or not, instead of, "Tell me why you like Donald Trump," and then get into maybe a little bit of substance about why anybody could be in favor of Trump.
Yeah, it just immediately derails any kind of nuanced conversation because
Oh,
now,
yeah.
and if a person is truly being vitriolic, they'll start accusing you of defending Nazis, which is ridiculous. You're just trying to explain that this was not an appropriate comparison on whatever your conversation was.
It sure does look bad when it's your own prime minister comparing uh, civil disobedience, people that are exercising their right to protest, that they're aligned with Nazis, and not once, but twice, three, four times. There was a real concerted effort there to embed the idea that these, freedom convoy people were aligned with uh, white supremacy and the worst kind of racism and bigotry. Terrible.
Yeah, well, and as you said, I mean, you can understand for an unprincipled person why it's a go-to. I mean, 99.9% of the world, if they've read history and understand it, they know that it's just the most odious thing you could possibly accuse somebody of being. So they go there, but it's certainly not a good way to go. As Cheryl's asking, did Justin Trudeau ever apologize to Lanceman? I don't believe he ever did.
No,
He just kind of
no,
let that go.
he didn't. And you could tell, I don't know, you could sort of tell that he knew what he was doing. He really didn't care. And he was very determined about it too. That was extremely disconcerting. That he seems to have just lost a kind of the sense of boundaries in terms of discourse of where you go, and he doesn't seem to care much anymore. I see it more and more that he's really pushing boundaries that in the past he would have apologized simply as, well, one parliamentarian to another. You just don't do that kind of thing. But I don't see much restraint in him anymore.
Oh, and as we age out, the newer generations get more distant from the atrocities that happened. Almost a century ago now. We're getting towards, and we don't want to desensitize people to what really happened. I mean, that was still a modern day horrific period of time that we never want to forget, because as we're seeing in Europe, we're still capable of getting on each other's throats. And I saw it from
Yeah.
another side with I was at a protest, and a number of people, this was quite a while back, well, I mean, a year or so ago, and they had put they were against vaccination mandates and such, and they put yellow stars on their jacket because they said we're being singled out, and this is symbolizing. No, guys, no, this is, look, you're appropriating something of a completely different horrific tragedy. I understand why you're upset, but do not, it's just not a valid comparison.
I
And
find elevation of either what people have lost, I think people have lost the ability to speak, uh, to say what they think using reasonable discourse, because the maybe it's social media where you have to get your opinion out in, very few characters, or because we don't have rational debates anymore. There's so much anger and divisiveness, that you just want to say, you want to, it's instead of punching the other person, you really want to punch them out. Instead, you just automatically go for the, misogynist, transphobic, some kind of bigotry. It's interesting. It's a tactic that is, I see mostly from the left, uh, but because the force of the word Nazi or Hitler is far greater than if you say what you're saying is just like the Marxists, or you're a real Lenin, or that guy's like a real Lenin. I don't even think most people would even react to that. As you say, everybody, there's so much ignorance about the past because it's 2 generations back. So people don't really understand when they put on a yellow star. Young people don't really have any concept anymore of what it means. But they've also lost the idea of how terrible it is to be, what the word communist used to stand for. That to me is a bad word. To me, it's pretty well as bad as calling somebody, a fascist or a Nazi. But it isn't. It isn't to people on the left.
No, I mean, we rightly, most people are disgusted whenever they see a swastika appear anywhere. But they kind of shrug their shoulders and accept it when you see a hammer and sickle. I mean, that hammer and sickle murdered millions of people as well. And again, and you shouldn't throw the term communist at somebody casually either. You said that in your article. You weren't a fan of Obama either, but you never called him a Stalinist.
No, I don't. I try not to do that. You mentioned the hammer and sickle. I remember I was in Toronto some years ago, and there was going to be a meeting of some kind, and it was at a bar downtown, and it was called I think it was a pub that was called the Hammer and Sickle, or it was called something else. But it was the whole theme was all the motifs of communism. It had Soviet art on the walls, and it was done in a spirit of irony and kind of as a fun theme. So it's interesting that the whole Soviet experience is something that I think most people on the left today uh, don't even recognize. They recognize it as, yes, communism was an excessive kind of thing, whereas Nazism was pure evil. They don't. I don't think they believe that communism was an evil system.
Yeah, well, there's a very solid death count to quite make it clear that communism was quite evil. And I mean, whether people want to, I'm sure if we could turn back time and pull some people up from the grave who were proponents of both of those systems, a lot of them actually did think somehow in their weird way they were doing the right thing or making the world a better place. But clearly they were not at all. And we can't put on any kind of rose-colored glasses to look at those periods of history. And
Well, every totalitarian thinks that what they're doing is in the end going to be better for, at least for their own nation. I remember historians used to think uh, Mussolini, when he invented fascism, it actually was seen in a very positive light at first. It sounded good what he was doing in the beginning. It was only later, 20, in retrospect, and when he aligned with Hitler, that fascism sort of definitely got a bad name. But in the beginning, it looked like it was going to be very good for Italy and pull it out of its economic doldrums and all that sort of thing. So sometimes you really have to know your history. It's a good lesson, and I wish they taught history with far more rigor than they do.
well, that's it. We don't want to purge the history of the actions of communists, Nazis, fascists by any means. We need to educate people on it, and but at the same time, just quit bloody throwing it around in contemporary situations because they don't apply, and it's reducing what the real impact of what those actions were back then.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess, moving on beyond that, just a plea to get people to stop using that word. It becomes, there was a column you wrote a couple of weeks ago that got a lot of our commenters stirred up with the Western Standard. We might as well go there because Jean Charest announced his leadership bid um, in Calgary last night. Dave was there. And you did feel that Jean Charest may be a good potential leader for the Conservative Party. Perhaps we could talk a little about that one.
Sure. Yeah, I knew I knew when I wrote it that it was woo. I hope I don't know. I hope I don't see pitchforks outside my door, knowing that I was writing for people largely who for whom Charest is real anathema. But look, let's face it. I am from the East, and I do have memories of Charest that are very positive. As a Quebecer who lived on a knife edge through two referendums here in Quebec. The second one was far more scary than the first one, and he was really the star of that show. There weren't many people. Lucien Bouchard was one of the most magnetic and charismatic uh, orators I've ever encountered in politics. He was a real force, and the only guy that really could stand up to him and measure him in terms of winning over an audience was Jean Charest. So that was kind of his moment in the sun, I guess. So I know a lot of Westerners say, "Well, I'm sorry that he swayed the referee. I would have liked to see Quebec leave."
Well, there's a number with that sentiment. I'm almost there myself, but
Yeah.
we're getting that perspective, and there's some truth to that. I mean, I ripped into him in my opening monologue a bit, but I mean, a part of his history, I did say he became the premier of Quebec, but I should say he displaced what had been a strongly entrenched Parti Québécois government for quite some time in Quebec when he brought in the Liberals, which would be definitely a victory for people who want a unified country, I guess, at that point.
Well, look, it's not just about unity. It's about it's about who can win, who can unseat the Liberals. People talk about Charest. I heard the last 5 minutes of your previous talking to Dave, and they say, "Oh, look at his baggage! Look at his baggage! He's got the Huawei uh, uh, connection and the carbon tax, and he's got this and he's got that. He can't surmount that baggage." And I'm thinking to myself, look at the baggage that Trudeau has accumulated. The Lavaland thing and the We scandal and the blackface. I mean, you can go on and on with the baggage that Jean Trudeau has. I mean, Pierre Trudeau has. I mean, sorry, Justin.
One of those Trudeaus, close
Yeah,
enough.
Pierre also had baggage too, but
Yeah.
Justin has a tremendous amount of baggage, and yet there something like 33% of the population intends to vote for him. So it shows you that baggage is not as important as people think it is if they see you as an overall strong leader of the country whose economic policies basically, or well, the fact that Justin gives away a lot of money helps. But I mean, it's not so much about an individual policy. It's more about, do you feel confidence in a leader? And Justin Trudeau should not inspire confidence, but he's had enormous good luck in that the people he's up against inspire less confidence. So, basically his main competition at the moment is Pierre Poilievre, who, by the way, I have a lot of time for Pierre. I like him very much. I admire him. I think he's smart as a whip, and I enjoy his performances in the House. But I feel he's very intense and very provocative at times. And I understand why the conservative base likes him very much. But I think I do not see him yet. I think he's young. I don't see him yet as being that person in whom a solid majority, or even a third of the country, would say, yes, he's a leader that I think could represent me, and that I feel confident that he would be for all the people. And for I think Charest has that quality of sincerely representing. He wants to represent all Canadians. He's a conservative who maybe not in the sense that Albertans want a conservative. Look, if he's energy friendly, all he has to be is energy friendly, and do his passionate "I represent all of Canada" thing. Honestly, I think he would take away a lot of liberals who don't like Trudeau, but they don't see a conservative leader that they would give their complete trust to. I'm not sure Poilievre is the guy who's going to take. He's going to take moderate liberals away from Trudeau, but I can see Charest taking a lot of moderate liberals away.
Yeah, well, the question starts coming down to, and that's what we'll see unfolding over the course of these months from the race is, do we want to turn, I mean, that's the truth of it. He's a Tory of the red sort, though not with scandals tied to him or things or whatnot, but should we liberalize the party more or go for the small C conservative in the fiery way of Poilievre? Do we believe that winning is more important than hanging on to those principles? It's an internal discussion that conservatives always have.
But Cory, you talk about hanging on to principles. What kind of principles, apart from the gun registry, or look, the conservatives have had several opportunities to hang on to their principles in terms of some bills that have passed that should never have passed with conservative votes that had to do with education and with children and conversion therapy and all that stuff. They voted without a second thought for it, and that is about the reddest. It's about the most liberal bills that have ever been passed in Parliament, and they didn't care because they don't put that principle, which they should, because it's the basis of our culture, parental rights and the kind of education that we would like to see our children have. They didn't put those principles first. So, this idea that we're so pure out here. We conservatives, we're pure in our motives. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it at all.
Okay, well, and again, yes, Western conservatives, for example, some of them voted in favor of retaining Quebec's seat there in that recent vote going on in protecting that down there. So we can't assume just because of a regional origin that a person's going to necessarily stand up for the region. But I mean, Westerners, we're just particularly with us out here, we're gun shy. We've
I get it. I get it. I know we're very divided, but the thing is that Canada has the people who are truly conservative, of the kind that Albertans like, are an absolute minority in the country. So even if you got every single vote in the country from every single vote, and that there's a lot of wasted votes for hardline, or I shouldn't say hardline, but for purer conservatives, there's a lot of wasted votes because a lot of them come from the West. So there's only that many seats. I don't know. I'd like to get Trudeau out myself. I think Jean Charest has a very good shot at it, and I would like to see energy friendly policies, and I would like to see responsible economic policies, and I think he could deliver on that. And I don't even know if he can take Quebec at this point, because he's not got a lot of love there at the moment. But he's very canny. He's very smart. He's a professional. He's had a long history in politics. He's a real grown-up, is what I mean to say. There have been a lot of, in my opinion, the Conservative Party has been looking to amateurs and to untried people because there's a kind of desperation to find that magic bullet. Another Harper, which there is nobody in sight at the moment. And even he didn't satisfy everybody. Didn't satisfy the social conservatives. He didn't,
well, it's always a difficult balancing act.
Nobody's going to satisfy all the conservatives. There just isn't. It's too mixed a bag.
Well, conservatives have always been a hornet's nest to try and hold together, as provincial or federal. We're watching that happening all over the place. I mean, our battles in Alberta right now are going to be legendary in just the next few weeks. What Well, I mean, if nothing else, one thing Mr. Charest certainly offers, though, he would be a more cerebral prime minister than the one we've got right now. Because boy,
Well, it's a pretty low
I know that's a
threshold.
low bar, but whatever Charest may be, he's certainly no fool, and he's experienced. So
That's for sure.
that's the closest compliment you'll get from a regionalist like me to Laurentian. So, but I mean, I'm glad to see a race. I always like that. I'm glad to see different ideas coming up. Acclamations, coronations, they don't do anybody any favors.
No.
You know, you've got to get it up there and get it on the line, and let the members get together and discuss that. So it's good to see a number of people coming from different directions, and we can hopefully trust in the wisdom of the membership to pick the best person out of the job.
That's what we have to hope for.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming in to join me today, and for providing those great columns. Though we really do enjoy them on the Standard, and I hope we get the chance to talk again soon, perhaps a
Yeah.
little farther up in the race there.
Okay, I hope so too. Thanks for having me, Cory.
Great. Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Cheers.
So that was Barbara Kay, and yeah, you know, I see some of the comment scroll was predictable. We know that we're the Western Standard. We're going to get that, but we do have to discuss those things, and you know. Acclamations and coronations, I don't like seeing those in races. I do want to see some of those issues pushed and prodded. I mean, I don't hold a political membership. I'm certainly going to lean one way or another and talk about who I like and don't like in these races and things like that. If I were a Conservative member, I couldn't see myself voting for Charest. But I don't think it's a bad thing to have that perspective come into the race, so it has to be discussed. And I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I should be talking, it looks like on Tuesday, with Pierre Poilievre. He's going to come on the show. And I suspect a lot of our viewers will appreciate his point of view. He's been very popular with small C Conservatives and such. But it is a big race. I mean, a question that has to be asked, can he win? You know we like him. We know he stands for what we'd like to see, but can he win? And then the question is, well, maybe you'd prefer to be in opposition and just stick to what's there. I don't see that necessarily as being so bad. Or I spoke with Tarek Al-Naga from the Maverick Party yesterday, and maybe a parliament with a number of parties is the way to go. And then, you know, there'd be a red Conservative sort of party in central Canada that dominates, and a Western Conservative party, and they're just going to have to find ways to get together and agree on some votes, you know, have a compromise. The old term for it is a pizza parliament. Sometimes you're going to have a bunch of different parties coming in. But I do want to have a good, nuanced discussion. I'm going to hit on one of our sponsors pretty quickly here, though. That's also the way we pay our bills around this place, and that is Bitcoin Well. Getting on, look at the way the world's going, look at the inflation, look at the craziness. And actually, I see digital currencies, though they've really had a bit of a seesaw. You know, one of the things with them is that you want to look at them in a long game sort of thing, not day by day. They rose crazy way for a few years, and they kind of dropped, and then they've been slowly rising, and then recently they spiked again. But the main thing is they're not tied to central banks. I mean, there's discussion about digital currencies and so on, but not with Bitcoin. And Bitcoin Well, they're a service. They're Western Canadian based. They're a safe company. They make sure you always hold on to your assets, and they facilitate your getting involved in the digital currency world. You know, I mean, there's a lot of questions people have. It's your money. You worked hard for it. You want to make sure it's safe. Well, these guys will walk you through it. They'll show you how to set up your wallet. They'll show you how to purchase it. They've got plans where you can set it and forget it and just have a certain amount, just kind of like a car payment, goes into your Bitcoin wallet every week or month or whatever you prefer. Check them out, bitcoinwell.com, you know, and have a look, because they give you so much instructional things and background on whether or not it's for you. It might not be for you, but these guys will give you that background and information. And they have a service that makes sure that you are always in control of your money, which is the most important thing in the end. And we can see if the federal government has their way, you are most definitely not in control of your money with the central banks right now. So we better be finding other ways to keep your funds. Bitcoin Well helps provide you with that. So, yeah, Dave was at the conference last night, and as we showed that video earlier and everything. It was great content, though. That's what I liked. And a lot of people forget, you know, some of those talk about with firearm owners and things. And you see what had happened when the registry went down. We had that registry through the 90s. That was pushed by Alan Rock and some others. And it failed. It failed dramatically. I mean, only probably 60% of the guns in Canada really got registered, the long guns. And it cost billions of dollars, even though they said it was only going to cost a few million. And finally, it was completely scrapped. But when it was scrapped, that's when the police forces of Quebec were demanding, they wanted the data from it. And Jean Charest, as premier, was supportive of them of that as well. And you know what? We know, and we can't prove it, but we know anybody who watched the High River situation with the RCMP when the floods happened, the disasters happened, and the RCMP were down there kicking down doors, and somehow they knew all the houses that had firearms. This registry that doesn't exist, they didn't kick down doors of houses that didn't have firearms. They only got the ones that people happened to have registered them. So we know the data is out there anyway. And but Charest wanted that data shared in the beginning. I guess again, let's just talking about like things with the carbon tax. At least he's being honest about it. He's saying share it with our police forces. We want to keep it and maintain it and have it going. Well, that's what happened in High River. We know that data is going around. It's really out of date now. I mean, it was never that good to begin with. But that's a big issue in the West. And no conventional media would have ever asked Charest that. No legacy media. As Dave said, he had to elbow his way past the tax-funded French media to get in there and get those questions. He knows what he's doing. He's not shy. And he got those questions to Charest. I'm sure Charest didn't want to talk about carbon tax out here as well. That's why he talked around it, because, I mean, it's an odious thing in the West. We do not like it. And if it was left to the CBC questioners, he probably never would have talked about it. It would have been more fluff. So, well, we'll keep watching that race. I'm going to look at, I ran that poll the other day. I see my Twitter account is up there at Cory B. Morgan for those people who do engage on Twitter and follow it and that. And I ran a poll just to see where my followers sit as far as supporting the candidates, the 4 that are fully officially in right now. And it's been up now for almost 24 hours. It's final. There were 1,400 votes, not a bad sampling. And again, it just reflects who follows me, not the people at large. 80.7% were for Pierre Poilievre, 8% for Leslyn Lewis. She was second. Roman Baber with 7%, and then Jean Charest at 4.4. And again, not too surprising. It doesn't, how much that would actually reflect on the Conservative leadership race outcome, I think is pretty slim, because Charest type supporters and such probably aren't the ones that follow me on Twitter a heck of a lot. I tend to poke at them and things like that. I mean, I'm a small C classical liberal. There you can see it. And Pierre Poilievre is certainly outstanding, though, among my supporters there. The thing we got to watch in this race, though, and you can't underestimate it. I mean, Denny, they're saying Charest is ancient history. Well, we'll see, because you can't. This kind of race, when it used to be one member, one vote, that's how Stephen Harper won. And that's because you could get hundreds of thousands of votes, sell those memberships in the West, and win the race, just in sheer numbers. But what they've got now, and I'm pretty sure, I really need to dig into that, is you get like 100 votes or 100 points per riding, I think it is, or something like that. And there's what, 328 ridings in Canada or something? You have to win support. It doesn't matter if you got 100,000 supporters in Calgary, there's only 14 ridings here or whatever it might be. It's only going to add up to so much. You've got to win support across the country. You've got to work very strategically and win that support all over the place. In fact, you can actually do very well if you can find and pull out supporters in really weak Conservative ridings. Because if you get into a really weak Conservative riding, maybe there's only 100 members there in the first place. So if you could get 80 of those, you're going to get that 80 points, versus in Calgary, where you're going to have to get thousands to make up that 80 points in the same riding. You see, it's more nuanced that way. And skilled operators like Charest and some of the people who are managing his campaign know that. So they're going to be working it out there. So, my Twitter poll, again, only shows who's among my supporters follow it. But when you look at how that's going to be weighted out across the country, it's going to probably be very dramatically different in that way. And then, of course, there's going to be the questions of first vote, second vote. I mean, whether somebody wins it on first ballot. With the systems in the past, we had a large trend of the third place finisher in the first run would always win in the end. That's how Redford won. That's how Stéphane Dion won. That's how Ed Stelmach won. And what that always leads to, actually, is usually a very weak leader. And that's why all 3 that I listed were very weak, and they didn't last very long. As Cliff is saying, it's a sick system. It is. Sylvia saying Roman Baber makes her laugh. What a joke. I don't know. I mean, he's a Ontario one who got in a large amount of battling with the Ford government, mostly over vaccine mandates and things like that. But he's definitely got a strong niche of support. And as Nico's been pulling up, we got a lot of other candidates lining up. The race is certainly very early at this point, and they can change. Again, so Jim Morrison asking, okay, is Pierre part of the West, WEF? And that's big, and it's been happening a lot. Now, I did a rant on the WEF. I broke down what they're about, and I'm concerned about them. I mean, that video, actually, if you look it up on the Western Standard site, has got I think like 70,000 views. It really went off. I do take it seriously. I do take Klaus Schwab seriously. I do not like, I mean, I've read into them. It's not a hidden conspiracy. It's not some strange, obscure thing. It's really there. But the other part is, how much do they actually influence the people who did attend all their forums? Just because you've attended one of their events doesn't mean they necessarily control you. I mean, there's no doubt Schwab wants the Great Reset. Schwab wants to bring in world socialism. Schwab wants to centralize power. He wants people to lose their wealth so they can reset it in this weird vision of his. That's not a secret. How much influence he really actually has on those people, though, is the question. And it's not to say none. He definitely has some. I mean, Justin Trudeau parrots his crap openly. Trudeau talked about a Great Reset. He spoke to the World Economic Forum. We had others like Canadian conservatives like Michelle Rempel. I believe Jason Kenney might have attended one before too. And I think Pierre might have, I'm not sure. But I mean, it doesn't mean that they've embraced the view of that forum. Politicians will attend and go to all sorts of different organizations and groups as guests, as listeners, and sometimes participants. So I honestly, Pamela Jones, Kenny said Pierre was on True North this morning. He said he has absolutely nothing to do with them. So the World Economic Forum is real. Their goals are real, but let's not give everybody an immediate guilt by association if they've ever come in contact with them. I mean, if you go into some of those large international things, it's almost unavoidable that you'll bump into them. But if they do embrace the World Economic Forum goals, then yeah, we do have a real problem, because it does have some very sick and destructive goals. So I'm going to turn the page a little bit here and get on to a nonpartisan candidate, though, and it was an interview I had. And just keep this in mind, that I know not everybody's from Calgary watching this, but this was a break. Calgary had an election that turned over a whole council. And again, we had a very strong union influence and so on. And they endorsed a number of candidates. And most of the union endorsed candidates won. But it was something that was nice that happened. One among those union endorsed ones made it very clear that she's not a part of that. And she's been taking common sense stances in council. And we're having that problem in municipal councils all the way across the country. Every city has got this challenge going on with some very terribly left-leaning, crazy city councils out there. So it was nice to talk to a common sense one who's gotten through. She had a tumultuous 6 months. She was fighting with Stephen Carter. We didn't dig much into that. He's a local weasel we have. He's gone now from the mayor's office, and she's settling in, after her first 6 months in. But it's good to see decent folks getting into those roles and taking some common sense things. And maybe we can see more of that in the municipal level of government. So we'll run that, and then we'll have some more talk about some news items here. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Councillor Sharp. I've been looking forward to talking to you for quite some time. It's such a huge turnover in the Calgary City Council and Mayor. We don't see that very often. This is more of a once in a decade sort of thing. And admittedly, there were some concerns about perhaps, it seemed almost as if there was a slate or an unofficial party of councillors. But among them, I mean, you've proven yourself to be quite an independent thinker and standing up for yourself. You're not obviously not acting as a part of any group. So that's to be respected. And I really been looking forward to the chance to chat with you about that.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here today.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's quite a learning curve. I mean, and a huge thing. I guess at least a bit of a disadvantage in coming into such a new council with so many new faces, though there were a couple of veterans who came back. I guess just in your experience in this last, you're almost halfway through your first year. In a nutshell, how's it been going for you?
Things been really, I would say, things have been going great. I came into this job, this role with, I would say, a wealth of experience of dealing with municipalities in general. So having that 20 years under my belt already as a previous city employee, I was able to navigate the system day one. So I kind of, it was nice to have the refreshers those first couple of weeks on orientation. But, I know the system. I know how municipalities work. I know the city of Calgary very well. I had pre-existing relationships where, I needed to get some work done right out of the gate. That was, kind of easy to cross the line. But you are still learning everybody else, right? You've got, 14 new colleagues, some with, different agendas, some with similar issues that you're dealing with. And you still have to kind of brand yourself and make sure that you're defining who you are, part of that 15 part of those 15 people. So, my biggest thing was, to represent my community, make sure that I'm following through with the things I talked about on the door and being me. That was one thing that I promised my constituents: what you see is what you get. And that's something that I will continue to do for the next like 3.5 years. So far, we've been in this for 6 months. And there were some moments, right, where things are up and down. There were some issues, personality issues, and you have to deal with that. But you need to deal with it the way that you would deal with the situation. How do you de-escalate things and amongst ourselves? And how do you work together? And how do you collaborate to get things across the finish line for the greater good? So, those first, I would say, 3 months, they're the hardest ones, just to learn different personalities and how people operate. And now we're in the next 3 that we're almost hitting 6 months now. Some of us have really gotten to know each other quite well, and we kind of even know like what triggers that person, and or what will make this person like totally collaborate. And those are great things. And to think that we're already at our almost 6-month mark is quite insane, actually. I'll be honest, because we've done a lot of work in 6 months. I know my office has been extremely busy with just constituent stuff and everything that's going on in the city. And so I'm looking forward to what the rest of this year is going to bring. So
Great. Well, Mayor Gondek came in, I guess, with a very ambitious start, I guess you could say. It was very quick hitting. Suddenly there was the declaration of a climate emergency, and then the unexpected issue that really kind of, I think, caught a lot of people flat-footed was the event center. And it's kind of back in the news now. So, I mean, it's on again, off again. It seems the deal had fallen apart last fall. And now it appears that there could be some new life being breathed into it with some different players. I think you're one of the ones that were on that committee, are you not?
I am one of the ones on the committee. So there are 3 councillors out of the 5 that are on the committee. Myself, Councillor Dan McLean, and Councillor Courtney Walcott. We also brought in Deborah Yeldon from the Calgary Chamber and Brad Perry from Calgary Economic Development. And so, there was a deal last July. There was changes in council. I would say there was some, background information that still needs to kind of be researched. There was a break in communication. A project of that scale, thinking back now that I think back about all of this is, I think council should have been kind of briefed at something like the scale of a new council saying, this is where the project's at, this is where we're going. Would there have been an opportunity to stop maybe, things going off the rail? Could have been. But I would like to say that we've dealt with that and now we need to move forward. So the new council committee was struck this week, sorry, I'm like, I'm wondering what week it is, on the 8th. And what's important here is that we make sure that now we work together to move forward. The event center is very critical for the city. It's critical for downtown. It's it's the heart of the Rivers District. And so now we need to use that momentum and keep going.
I think almost everybody would agree that something has to be done with that zone down there. I mean, we now have a giant zone of parking lots on the edge of a downtown that's already ailing and has already, had challenges being a destination for people to come down and do things. I guess a lot of the debate though is going to be how much obligation is there on the part of the city of Calgary or taxpayers to participate in filling that void, and how much is in the private mix. It's going to be quite a discussion, but we can't wait too much longer. I mean, this has been going on for a long time now.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So I think what we need to know, what we really need to do first is get the third party up and running and get that going. They will have those conversations with the partners. And time and speed is important. We do know that everything's raising in price. So cost escalations are a big deal. But what we want to make sure is transparency on what is going to be taxpayers, what's going to be private funding. That was very transparent towards the end of the second deal. And really, what does this mean for Calgary? So that is what's really important. And so right now, I don't have all those answers for you, but that is something that we hope to get to sooner than later.
So Calgary downtown in general, and then I work downtown, with the work from home orders lifted, it's been nice actually to see how crowded it's gotten. It was so moribund down here for so long, but still there's a massive amount of downtown vacancies, as well as issues of social disorder. I mean, that happens when an area ends up getting a lot of vacancy and issues. I mean, we're in a unique period of time. It's not in your ward, but of course, everybody's got to work together on that sort of thing. Have you got plans or notions on initiatives to try and sort of, I guess, make Calgary's downtown more appealing, I think, both to citizens and to, of course, commercial customers to hopefully start filling those spaces?
Yeah, and so we do have a downtown strategy team that was, it's taken a couple years to fill that team properly, and so they've just given that team a director, and so his name's Tom Muller, and I've worked with Tom for many years, and he's in charge of the whole downtown strategy, which is a great. What's going to be great for this team to work together, and there's a lot of office to residential conversions, and that's great. So we can start moving people downtown, get that density of people living there. But what we really need now is the amenities. So how do we draw those people downtown, and who's the audience? So are we looking at drawing in students? Are we looking at drawing families? Single folks. So you need to make sure you're crafting the downtown to the right audiences that want to live down there. I know it's not really part of Ward 1, but a vibrant and sustainable downtown really does help the suburban communities. We got to get that tax base downtown so that we can look at opportunities outside of that area. And it's been struggling for a long time. I'm trying to think, like pre-pandemic, we're looking 2016, 2017, when things started to kind of go, sideways. And then, we had the pandemic and it just kind of got worse. And I think that's what we now need to look forward and say, okay, how can we draw the right balance of people and amenities downtown to increase that tax base so that the rest of the city can really benefit from it?
So, I mean, it's kind of tied into it and related, back to that area, though, of social disorder and challenges. And I mean, that's I think a multi-government level sort of thing. We got mental health issues to deal with. We've got addiction issues to deal with and poverty issues. But it does tie into the municipal and transit. Some LRT stations are still remaining closed. I know there's been more initiative to bring security and police on, but people are kind of wondering, well, how long are these facilities going to remain shut down? Because it feels like a Band-Aid solution to a bigger problem. I mean, it's understandable. It was out of control down there. Something had to happen quickly, but what's on the go to try and get things, I guess, kind of closer to normal? Because that's what will draw people downtown as well more, if they feel safe when they can ride downtown and enjoy it.
So we had a couple of weeks ago, we had an emergency meeting with transit, and so they offered some solutions right away to what was happening in some of the more northwest stations that we've seen an increase of homelessness and crime and mental health issues. We and not just that, it's got to make sure that it's safe for everybody. And so we've added more officers. There was 18 graduating class that was able to jump on right away. I believe there's another class of new transit officers going through the system right now. And this is a bigger problem, right? Like the transit stuff we're seeing is just, it's a piece of it all. But what we really need to focus on is, how are we working towards our mental health strategy? How are we working with our provincial partners in order to make sure that there's funding to get the right resources in place to support what's happening? We had a meeting today with CPS as well. It's one of the areas that's, got some issues happening in the community because of what's happening in the transit. So we have to make sure we're working together. But we as a city need to work with all levels of government to get the proper funding and resources to support our communities. This is really important. What I would also say is that some of these train stations, they might need a little bit extra, equipment. Do we need turnstiles? Maybe. Do we need more cameras? Maybe. We need to start looking at municipalities that are much larger than Calgary and learn from them. I don't think I've been to a train station in Vancouver or Toronto that you can get in without a ticket on the platform. So these are things we need to start reconsidering. And Transit's been really great. They've been really open to hearing our suggestions. And will it cost more money? Possibly, but these are the conversations council has to have in order to keep our transit and our roads safe. So we've got to really fundamentally focus on our priorities, particularly this year moving forward for the next 3, and understanding from the last couple of years that we're in a different place now. We'll increase ridership. I would, a lot of people think increased ridership is going to change everything and, everything's going to go back to normal. And we don't know that. And so I think you'd be naive to say, yeah, it will. But I think we've got to be very cognizant. We're at a totally different time in our lives now, and the city is a different place.
Yeah. So in talking with multiple levels, that's always been a challenge in municipalities. The relationship of the last administration and the provincial government was pretty toxic. And the current one, unfortunately, at least to a degree, has been a little bit challenged, to say the least, when it came to things like health authority, who has the authority to lookout, I guess, for on health regulations, whether it's municipal or provincial, and if there's a difference of opinion. It seems to have been resolved for the moment, but has there been any discussion? An item that comes up periodically quite often is the pursuit of a city charter or adjustments to the Municipal Governance Act. Are you taking part in or looking at any of those kinds of initiatives in the future?
I mean, I keep myself with we keep ourselves apprised of all the information. I believe this morning I heard that Minister McIver has made some surgical changes to the MGA regarding just putting some positions in place for the cities not to put specific health regulations on their own cities. But, that's where we're sitting with that. And I'm not putting any initiatives forward to change the MGA at this point, or allowing the cities to have more power or less power. The province has gone in to do a surgical change. That's good, because if we're going to open up the MGA to do bigger changes, that's a whole different story. There's things in the MGA that, that's not just health and safety. There's planning things that can be looked at as well. So this is something that I heard this morning, that it was very minor, very surgical, and then we just kind of learn from that and say, does it ever have to change again? And I always think like you can always go back if you need to. It's really important to have those conversations, and that relationship's really important as well.
What about in the regional area things? I'm actually living in Prudence. I'm right on the edge of the city, even though I work in the city, and I lived in the city for 30 years. So I'm still concerned with city issues, of course. But there's been a lot of clashes, again, when it comes to the metropolitan plan and some possible overriding of authority of municipalities, Foothills, Rocky View, and such. You're on at least one of the more suburban wards. Are you going to be looking into some of those issues as things go forward? It's been quiet, I guess, on the front of the new administration so far, but I can imagine as the city considers outward growth as is normal, we're going to see some sparks probably flying pretty soon. So perhaps we could preemptively avoid some of those.
So I don't sit on any of the committees with that for like the MD of Rocky View or the other municipality committees at this point. But there's different important issues, obviously bordering each of the municipalities. We do share a very fine border with the MD of Rocky View. So, I mean, I have like Lynx Ridge, for example, and it's kind of split between Bear Spa, but Bear Spa is not in Ward 1. So there's always little issues that we may have to work together as a city municipality together, which is important. And that's, again, relationship building and making sure you have that, those conversations at the table. But right now, what I'm really focusing on is listening to the constituents and those that really do border those lines, and making sure that they're being taken care of. And if there's issues happening on the MD side that's affecting them, then it's my responsibility to have that conversation with the MD of Rocky View.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I think I covered a lot of what I wanted to cover. Are there a few issues you'd like to address before I let you go here?
No, I mean, I think this has been a great opportunity to have a conversation, and I would say there's a lot more to come for sure in the next 3.5 years. So happy to come on the show again one day. Cory, thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. That's part of why I wanted to stay a little broad. I'm hoping to talk to you again in the future as we get specific issues and things like that, but just to get a feel with a new councillor on where you're going and what you're looking to do. But as I said, so far, I'm not out for plain flattery, but it's just good to see that you've been looking at issues broadly, it seems, and you're your own person, which is really appreciated, not always the case in City Hall. So thanks, and thanks for coming on, and I hope we talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
Hey guys, yeah, I see some of the comments, and I'll address them. Like in that case, it's hard with city councilors, especially when they're in session, to get them on during this show because they're in. So that was actually a recorded one. It was a little earlier, so she wasn't able to see those comments, but there were good ones. And some things, asking about WF again, I have no idea in that case. She's, I didn't get too rough on anything. It was her first interview on here as a new councillor, and as I said, this shows how sick Calgary City Council is, though. With one of the things she talked about, which is considered controversial and it shouldn't be, was even talking about perhaps having turnstiles or some sort of means to check tickets on transit, like everywhere else in the world. I actually listened to a couple of radio DJs on a music station last week or so, because the city of Calgary actually had some officers down there checking tickets, and they were screaming about it. It's a cash grab, and it's cracking down on the poor homeless and everything. Guys, these are trains, not homeless shelters. It's not unreasonable. It's not a cash grab to ask people to pay their bloody fare. I haven't ridden the train in a while now, but for a while I was using it to get down here downtown. I never got checked for a ticket once. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who just didn't bother buying them. It's an honor system. I did keep buying them because I pay for a service I take. That's the way it goes. I don't need enforcement to keep me doing that. But a lot of people think otherwise. So, I mean, how many millions was the city losing in that? I don't know. And the other aspect was a lot of, and we put videos up of it. We covered it. The open drug consumption, the drug deals that were happening on trains. I mean, this were just a pipeline for addicts, not to mention, I've shown maps of the crime. Everywhere where the train line goes, there's a huge crime wave everywhere within walking distance of a train station because it's just a pipeline for the addicts and the criminals to get out to other neighborhoods. You know, none of them are paying for their tickets to get on the bloody train. So just one solution. There's that map. Man, Nico's quick. I didn't warn him I was going to pull that one up, but he found it. So yeah, as you can see, those dark colors, I mean, it's bold. You can see the crime follows the train line. Maybe if these guys had to pay $3.80 or whatever it is to ride the train, it would reduce the amount of them using the train for those purposes. It's simple solutions for things. Save some money, get people to pay for the service. And, you know, there's the inside of a bus station, you know, where the homeless people basically set up camp and live for a night. Like, it's turning into a mess. So some of these things we've got to take care of. And Sonya's actually willing to even dip into that, which a lot of councillors aren't. It's frightening that even those sort of common sense things are not up for discussion. And she hasn't fallen down their rabbit hole, and I hope she doesn't. So we'll keep an eye on that because, again, every city's dealing with a lot of these problems right now. But Calgary's downtown is something else. Let's pivot a little more provincial. Lots going on. I'm going to have Jody Gateman on the show next week. Actually, she's going to come on. She was punted as a potential nomination candidate for the UCP on some very shaky grounds and old social media posts. Tim Hoven was another one kicked out, and he was running against Jason Nixon. And just to answer a question, I know it distracts people when I get going. Ashley was asking, how do you get what you steal on a train? Well, they just walk onto it. They push their shopping carts right onto the train. You can go out and cut off your catalytic converters out in the residential area and then ride the train down and push your shopping cart over to the place that's buying them. And, you know, none of them admit that they're buying them, but obviously somebody is. So no, it's not hard at all for those guys. There's no control on those trains. They have increased some enforcement, but setting up maybe turnstiles is the way to go. You know, just make people pay. And it's not that complicated, I wouldn't think, but it isn't in Calgary. Either way, Tim Hoven, yes. So he's vowed to fight drive-by attempts at character assassination that disqualified him, running against Jason Nixon in Rimbey, Rocky Mountain House Sundry. He says the United Conservative Party resorted to insinuations, allegations, and petty attempts to oust him from a competitive campaign against Nixon. That was a statement he put out. Like, the woes of the UCP, and particularly Jason Kenney, are far from over. And he's in some serious trouble. You know, all of those ticked off members that Hoven sold memberships to, they're going to be going and voting against Kenney on April 9th. And I was talking to David Parker yesterday. I was quite surprised. I mean, we're hearing numbers all over the place, but it's definitely going to be thousands and thousands of people converging on this Red Deer Hotel to make this vote. We'll never have seen anything like that. And the Western Standard will be set up. We're going to be there, a whole bunch of us. We're spending the whole weekend there covering it. We're going to be live streaming and interviewing a lot of people. It's going to be quite a wild weekend. But it's just getting worse and worse by the day, it seems. And the by-election is coming up right away in Fort McMurray, Lac La Biche. And that's where I'll be talking to Paul Hinman on Monday. He's been running in it. And as well, we've got Brian Jean, of course, probably the favorite, but we'll see. With a vote split, Paul was saying in an interview recently with the Standard that if the vote split the right way, he could win that perhaps with 35% support. And that would certainly shake things up too. But, you know, there's no outcome looks good for Premier Kenney. Brian Jean is running basically on an anti-Kenney platform. Paul Hinman, of course, is running from a completely different party. And if the NDP wins, well, that's saying, well, gee, the NDP could win all of Alberta if Jason Kenney is still premier. So there's no avoiding it. That's going to be Tuesday night. We're going to be covering that as well when those results come in. So keep an eye on this site. We'll have those reported as soon as they come in. We're probably going to have some panels and people talking about it. And so I'm going to talk actually, before I get into a little more news here as we wrap up the week, about another one of our sponsors. And it's a valid one considering Jean Charest and his stance on firearms, and that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, CSSA-CILA.org. I've talked about them a lot. Their name says it all. Look them up. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. If you own firearms, you're looking to own firearms, this is an association where you can get together with people and share resources. Everything from where are there going to be trade shows or some videos on the safe operation of firearms, target shooting, collecting, storage, all of that stuff. They got all those resources there, as any association of people, with a common interest will have. And then most important of all, they've got multiple legal challenges. As you can see, they're mentioning Jean Charest is no friend to Canada's firearm owners. They've got legal challenges against the government standing up for your right to keep your firearms. Because what keeps happening, the registry came and went, it fell apart. But what they're doing now is every year they do an order in council and they illegalize a whole bunch more firearms on some arbitrary basis. And suddenly you have to turn them in or you're turned into an instant criminal. It's wrong. And they're using the courts to fight back for you. And the only way to do that, though, you got to join them. Take out a membership with these guys. It's worth it, just beyond the court challenges, but also just as a good resource for you as a firearm owner. So check them out. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. They are a good group, a good cause, and they'll help you out. And they've been sponsoring us, which helps. Getting back to the tax-funded world, the CBC, Dave talked about that earlier. They retracted another false Freedom Convoy story that suggested foreigners played a large part in the protest. They claimed, it's funny, The World This Hour, that's self-described as Canada's most trusted audio newscast. Really? Yeah, all 100 viewers or whatever it is of that. But either way, in a report, they said that the fundraising was from foreigners and so on. No explanation was given. It turns out it was a pile of BS. And they've yanked that and apologized and backed off. But you see, the damage gets done already. This was all the buildup that the bought and paid for media, and you don't get any more bought and paid for than the CBC, was doing to try and make support or make the case for why Justin Trudeau was going to suspend our rights in using the Emergencies Act and take things over. So the CBC was in trouble. They did their thing, but they backed off. And you know what? It won't hurt them a bit. Unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. Mask mandates, those are dropping across the country. We're seeing that all over the place. I'm liking seeing that, of course. And the whining, boy, it's getting going though, isn't it? I'm watching people, well, I'm going to keep wearing my mask. Well, good for you. I don't care. And then there's others saying, I'm not going to go out to businesses now because so this demasking is going to hurt business. Oh, BS. You guys are full of crap. I was in a restaurant last night for the first time in a while, and I talked to them. They said, no, I mean, the masking has helped them for sure in getting rid of all those regulations. But the other part was the vaccine passport. And they said their sales since then have finally been closer to what they were 2 years ago. We've got to get rid of these stupid mandates. And these dumb arseholes that are constantly pushing, they aren't even making the health case anymore. They aren't. It's a point of principle of saying we just have to keep control of everybody all the time. And we got to keep everybody masked. And I'm going to keep masking, and we won't stop. It's a zero risk cult. It's a cult. Well, the world's unmasking whether you guys like it or not. If you want to hide in your basements in fear, fine. But I'm sick of you spreading your fear. Take your fear and shove it somewhere deep and dark. I'm tired of it. We are following the science. That's why the world is dropping mask mandates. It's funny how silent old shrill Rachel Notley got when her partner Horgan in BC said he's dropping the mask mandates. When Jason Kenney did it, it was going to be the end of the world. It was terrible. It was awful. Oh my God, people are going to be stacked like cordwood. The bodies, the horror, the humanity. Horgan does it. Crickets. Then she went back to her BS corporate tax grab line that she's been spouting out for the last 4 years. That's why we really do have to get our crap together somewhere, one of these parties or something on the Conservative front in Alberta, because if Notley gets back in, listen to her. She's insane. We are going to be in for 4 years of hell. So we better figure out what the hell we're doing. But for now, yes, the world is moving in the right direction. It's been in the wrong direction for a long time. Some people say it's too little, too late. I don't know. It's never too late. At least get it done. Get out of it. We're getting there. We're really close to normal. We still get these federal mandates. Still can't get on a plane. We still have people who lost jobs because they didn't choose to be vaccinated. We got a lot of stuff to work out. But we're going the right way. And actually, I'm talking to a guest next week about masks. He did some studies. He's a scientist. And people say masks are harmless. Well, he did some things with breathing studies and tests and such. And he found that, no, they aren't necessarily as harmless as a lot of people were putting across. I mean, they're certainly not something that's going to drop you. People wear masks for workplace uses all the time for all sorts of things. But they're not completely harmless either. And let's have an open talk about this. Let's discuss this. This guy, has got those numbers out there. So it's not just the inconvenience, and these aren't minor inconveniences. And one I've gone on about with the masks a lot was, I mean, I don't hear terribly well. It's a long story on that. Worked around some helicopters, didn't listen to the safety guide, blah, blah, blah. Either way, I supplement my hearing a lot with a bit of lip reading. And when a person's got a mask on, of course, I can't do that. And that's just, in my case, supplemental. At least I can turn, my head and put my left ear towards somebody and get that, what they're saying, if it's in a loud environment, and pull it off. People who are fully deaf really are had a miserable time with the bloody masking. This isn't a minor inconvenience. This is taking them out of the communication loop with the world. For years, there was a gentleman, Craig, he used to come to my bar all the time when I owned it down in Pritis, a fantastic guy. And I couldn't, I was always be astounded with how good he was at lip reading. When it was a loud night in the bar, I had better communications with Craig back and forth because he could do the lip reading and express himself. Whereas the other customers, of course, were just trying to scream into the noise. So, Craig and many, many other people who are hearing impaired, I'm sure, are extremely celebrating the end of these bloody masks. They're uncomfortable. They're not good for us. And the people who really are scared, they're scared. They're not just ones with a political agenda, not just the zero risk cultists. They've been programmed. What a terrible place to be. You're actually going to be nervous. You're going to have stress levels. Your heart rate's going to go up if you leave your house because there's people around you without masks on. I mean, it annoys me, but I also feel sorry for them. That's a horrible way to live. What a terrifying place to be. I mean, this is not good. This is what 2 years of fear-mongering has done to us. And we've seen the numbers. We can't keep pretending the numbers aren't there. It's not 2 years ago when this was first coming out and we didn't know what was going to happen. And masking, the benefits have been negligible at best. Negligible. Everybody's realizing we've just got to live with this. We got to look at long-term solutions, and we're not hearing enough discussion. I want to get more guests to go on about that in the future. We realize our healthcare system fell short, but we're not doing anything to fix it yet. We just keep pumping money into a broken system. We've got to examine the system. Are we going to learn from this 2 years of crap or not? Because even if it's not COVID, I mean, who knows what bug's going to come 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And if it starts pressuring the limits of our healthcare system again, guess what? They'll lock us down again, whether it works or not. So let's get that capacity. Let's make sure. I mean, I know we can't keep a hospital with beds and wards and trained staff on standby all of the time in case they suddenly need to accommodate 1,000 people in the ICU. But we do and can change the system to make that more flexible. Like one of the main things that got on my nerves, we put it off and passed off so many surgeries and procedures, which probably killed, we can't measure the amount of people because of deferred treatment. And it's because we've got all these centralized hospitals. Well, decentralize it. Let's get out of this rigid socialized system. Let's keep the hospitals, because you couldn't bring a bunch of contagious people in where there are going to be these surgeries. Well, why can't we, you go to other countries, you'll find surgical centers specialized for all sorts of things that aren't at hospitals. You can get a hernia operation at a standalone clinic. And guess what? The pandemic wouldn't have slowed them down a bit. You get back surgery at a different place. You can get your dialysis at a different clinic. You can see an oncologist in a different cancer center. And that way you're not losing and putting off all of these procedures because you're worried about keeping the hospital from having infectious people within it. The hospital can stay going for the acute cases, but you know what the problem is? It's the unions. They're going to get ticked off because private facilities, and that's the only way it's going to work. You're going to have some private facilities. It doesn't mean you're paying out of pocket. It just means that they're going to be outside and run, and yes, they're going to make some profit. What do you think the unions do? Man, those guys make millions and millions of dollars too. But we need to re-examine the system, and nobody's talking about that. Nobody's got the balls to talk about that, but we have to talk about it. Canada's system is not the best in the world. It's one of the crappiest, and it's getting worse all the time. And nobody has the courage to talk about it, not just tweak it, not just fix it a little bit. We need to gut this system and rebuild it based on world models. There are so many European models, Australian models, all sorts that are far better than ours. They're getting better bang for their buck. Everybody still gets coverage. So let's start talking about it. We haven't yet. That's the next phase of recovery from this pandemic is what do we have to do differently so we don't have to go through this again? And reforming the healthcare system is going to be a key component of that. All right, that's enough ranting out of me for the week. Let's remind everybody again, get on there and subscribe if you haven't already, please. And thank you all so much who have already subscribed. It helps us keep going and maintains things. We're doing a lot of growth and movement and expansion. We're going to be covering things, as I said, Tuesday night with the election, by-election at Fort Mac, to see what comes out up there. Have a number of guests coming on. So take out a membership if you haven't already, and there's a newsletter you can get, keep you up to date day by day on what's happening. And if you get a subscription, don't forget that word triggered. Throw it in there. You'll save yourself a few bucks, and everybody needs a few bucks. Save $10. You know, that'll get you another 2 or 3 kilometers in your car, right? Maybe 4 if you got a real small car. Drive slowly. Monday, I'm going to have the leader of the Wild Rose Independence Party, Paul Hinman, on. The advanced polls are finished this weekend. Monday will be kind of a break. He's still going to be working. And then Tuesday, of course, the polls are up and he's going to be busy. And I will talk to Jody Gateman, who got barred from running for the UCP. So, yeah, it's going to be some very interesting conversations on Monday. And I'm sure a lot of news will be breaking over the weekend. And yeah, there's protests going on in Calgary, and it sounds like there's a counter protest getting set up to try and push back against them. They really want to inflame what has always been a peaceful protest so far. So let's hope they don't get away with that and turn it into something bad. So thank you all for tuning in today and tuning in all week. And I look forward to seeing you all on Monday morning, guys.